we're still tuning up. In fact, the whole evening is tuning up. In fact, all of life is tuning up. We're tuning out of dualism into non-dualism. We're tuning into being here and now. Just tuning in. We're tuning into who we really are. All this game is designed to do is to remind us. Remind us. Because there's nothing I can get from this evening that I don't already have. In fact, it turns out there's nothing I can get from anything that I don't already have. Therefore, if I need anything, that's obviously ignorance. How could I need anything? I'm already it. He's sitting up there telling us he's it. Obviously a messianic complex. He got up there right there in the church, Arlington Street Church. Imagine that. Dressed all in white. He sat up there and he sang holy songs, and then he said, I'm it. I mean, man, who wants a heavier game than that? But who I is everybody here, right? I mean, you're saying this. I'm just our mouthpiece. It's when I cease being anybody up here that it gets interesting. Then I'm just a conduit for where we are. So I was saying about the music. The music is the sum of the vibrations of where we are. But tuning up is complicated, you see, because we're tuning up. We're tuning up. We're not tuning out. Tuning up. We're changing our vibrational rate. The way it works in India, in the Hindu system, see, there's only one man in the universe, and it's God. Everything else is, or the one male, all the rest is female, passive, open, receiving. And the guru, or a being who has realized, he has surrendered totally. He's just, right, not mine, but thy will. And the minute he's surrendered, not mine, but thy will, then through him pours all this power, all this light, all this energy. The minute he stops saying, I'm going to play my game, and then everything he thinks happens, except, you understand, there's nobody thinking anything. The game is so exquisitely designed, right, that you don't get the power to move mountains, as I said before, unless you are the person who created the mountain in the first place. And then you put it there, so why would you move it? Along the way, you can get a lot of lesser powers, which you can really screw around with, see? The powers of the rational mind. Wow, look what we can do with them. We can create this edifice. This is a thought form. You can all see that, obviously. You can see the guy who thought it, right? He thought this. he externalized some thought form. And we're living in his thought form, right? You can all feel that. And the thing you got to be wary of, or it's interesting, you have to be wary of it. It's like there are dangers lurking. The thing you have to be conscious of, right, is which thought forms suck you deeper into dualism. Okay? For the first part of the evening, my brother Leonard played the organ. This is a family affair, as you might see. My father is here celebrating his birthday. My brother plays the organ. The whole family's gathered. We're all here, aren't we? All the cousins, uncles, aunts. We're all the family. We once had a house in Newton, and it was one of our first communes in 1962. And there were 12 bedrooms in it. And there were many people living in it of various, rather heterogeneous background. And we had a cocktail party for the neighbors so they wouldn't get upset because it was a nice middle-class Newton area. And there were more of us than there were them, and we had 5 little cars. And pretty soon somebody started a petition to have us removed, not because we weren't nice, but because we would lower the real estate value of the area. And so this came before the zoning board of Newton. And I owned the house in title. So I had to represent myself, and I asked my father, who was a lawyer, who didn't necessarily approve of all we were doing, but, you know, it was his son, to represent me at this gathering. We all came, the entire family came and sat in the zoning board's rooms, City Hall. And my father pleaded the case, much in Clarence Darrow fashion, pacing up to the gentleman and explaining to him, after he had gone through all of the dictionaries, extant dictionaries, that family did not necessarily demand consanguinity, that is, blood tie, unless it's so specifically stated. And that indeed we were a family. We were a single housekeeping unit. And he alluded to the family of man. Okay. And he blew their minds. And the mayor came over and he said, well, it looks like we lost this one, but we'll change the zoning ordinance now to make it consanguinity, right? But we were declared legal family of man in Newton. Due to my father's offices. I dig all this talking I do. Okay? I mean, you read all these holy books and they all say silence is golden. Okay? What is true can be said without words. All words are lies. I read them and I get up every night and do this thing. Okay? And I think it's very far out, you know. I mean, are they all speaking lies, or what am I doing? And then I dig that we're just tuning up. We're still tuning up. That we use words until we're done with words. I mean, if you were all finished with words, you wouldn't be sitting here now. If I were, I wouldn't be. This is our karmic predicament. See? We still need to reassure ourselves through our rational mind. John the Baptist says, that I am coming before and he will come after, and that when he comes, he is the light, then he will increase and I will decrease. Now, if you think in the symbology of it, that John the Baptist is the speaker of the light and Christ is the light, then you see all the words about the light. You don't have to sit around and say, hey man, dig the light. when you are the light. Beings who are the light don't keep going around saying, I'm the light. Excuse me, I'm the light. In Dad's library, I found Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. And Christian meets the evangelist. And he says to the evangelist, look, in order to become the light, what do I have to do to get rid of this burden that I'm carrying around? This heavy ego game. These are, Then said evangelist, pointing with his finger over a very wide field, do you see yonder wicket gate? The man said, no. Then said the other, do you see yonder shining light? And Christian said, I think I do. Then said evangelist, keep that light in your eye and go up directly thereto, so shalt thou see the gate, at which when thou knockest, it shall be told thee what thou shalt do. And there is a statement of Lao Tzu's that says, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Now, when my brother and I were, last night, Tenny and my brother and I were playing hymns, thinking about what kind of hymns should be played in this church tonight, my brother at first was playing beautiful hymns, but when you read the words were always dualistic. You know? Like, I'm here and you're there and I want to be you, like you. You know? Get me out of this place. Take the veil of tears away. It's so hard, let me love you. And it was always as if I'm this schlock character, see, and you're really all light, man, wow, you know. And just let me hang out by your feet. See, I was, today we were at the Peabody Museum over at Harvard, and I was looking at a male and female skeleton next to each other, and I was wondering about where original sin started. I was trying to put myself in the head of two beings, and when they said, oh, wow, what that thing was, that guilt, that, the fig leaf trip, and the whole dualistic thing. I'm making it with her. Because if engrossed is the bee of the mind in the Divine Mother, you just merged. And then it's all natural acts like water flowing downstream. Just all natural acts. So we picked out hymns that were like saying, wow, here we are, dig this. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Like, wow, it's right here now. Whew. Ah, it's written by stoned out people, see, who can't do anything but write a hymn, you know. I mean, like their mind is so blown, they got to write about it. All these songs we sing that Yogananda created. You know, I am a bubble, make me the sea, you know. Who is in my temple? All the doors do open themselves. All the lights do light themselves. Darkness like a dark bird flies away, oh, flies away. I mean, it's all happening. Not, please let it happen. It's all happening. Okay? It's just a slight upbeat flick of the whole thing. Okay? It's really interesting to write a hymn when you're not in the spirit, see? Because you write hymns. But when you're in the spirit, you don't write hymns. You're just being a song. And then it happens to end up on paper. Okay? And finally, you begin to see, like the whole thing, the whole hustle about creativity. Now, let's study creativity. Let's make people more creative. I mean, if you're conscious, every move you make is a creative movement. How could you be otherwise? Because it's all, look, I am making all things new. It's all perfectly fresh each time. How could it be anything else? It's always that perfect act. Yeah, wow. The optimum move at any moment. The totally creative breath each time. One of the hymns that Leonard played, I would be true, for there are those who trust me. I would be pure, for there are those who care. I would be strong, for there is much to suffer. I would be brave, for there is much to dare. I would be friend of all, the foe, the friendless. I would be giving and forget the gift. I would be humble, for I know my weakness. I would look up and laugh and love and lift. Last summer I made a survey. I went to different kinds of churches, and often I would find these hymns being sung in a kind of mechanical way. And I would read them and I think, wow, they're saying it all. But you'd look in the faces and it would be dulled and dimmed and deadened. Wow. See, how that original sin started is the same question as how it all began. Often when there are questions, when we digress to, or when we come down to questions and answers, somebody says, they raise their hand, I say yes, and they say, how did it all begin? Or they say, why did it all begin? I mean, why all this dualism? Why did it all begin if we're all trying to get back to being one? And the best answer I've heard is Buddha's answer, which is, it's none of your business. I think that's most to the point. He says, he's like saying, who wants to know? You know? You think you're ready for this one? In the Torah, there's one word that you only study by yourself. You don't study with a teacher or with other people, and the word is Bereshit, in the beginning. You just go and meditate on that one. You don't read books about it. You just go and sit down. In the beginning. What could it mean if we're in eternal time, the word in the beginning? Had this very far-out experience in New York where simultaneously or consecutively or sequentially, or whatever the word is, doing things in New York. You know, we're all in New York too. We're in San Francisco and Montreal, and we're everywhere. So here we are. We just figured it out that we're here. All of us. So every week we get down to New York and all of us are here again. So the first week in New York, last week, was a beautiful Indian singer singing. And then at the end of it, this fellow came forward who was wearing black jacket, beard, Levi's, had a big, huge cross. And he knelt. We were doing it in the Universalist Church in New York, which has a mural of Christ's feet being washed. And he kneeled down, and to the mural he sang the Kaddish, right? Which is the mourner's prayer, which is a very far out thing to do when you got a cross. And he sang it just like a very high cantor. Right? And then he walked away, and it blew my mind. So then the evening, and then we were all singing Ram, right in the middle of the Universalist Church. And he appeared on stage, and he was holding his cross for dear life, not singing Ram. And I felt his vibrational rate, and he was seeing, through his eyes, he was seeing the height of profanity of the people dancing and worshiping pagan gods right in the middle of the church. Right? And that's where his head was at, okay? And when the singing died down, at one point, we were singing Hare Krishna, right? And I sort of wanted to help the audience get off, and me too. And I thought, you don't have to sit like this. And I got up and I started to, I was just going out on Hare Krishna. And somebody had given us a box of strawberries. And I was there all in white, standing in front of 2,000 people, with my arms stretched, with my eyes closed, and I suddenly felt this wetness in my hands. And this fellow had come forward, and he had taken strawberries and mashed them into my two hands. Now, that's high showbiz, but it's like a very far-out scene, So somebody had brought an Oriental rug, and I didn't want to drip the strawberries on the Oriental rug. That was my major concern at that moment. Since you have to stay conscious at all levels. So I gently sat down and I ate the strawberries. And we went on singing. And then he came forward when the singing quieted down, and he started a long sermon, an extraordinarily powerful sermon about the coming of the Armageddon, and of Babylon and dancing, and the people were so corrupt they didn't even see it happening, and it was about to all end, and about Noah and the ark, and how this was the height of evil, and didn't these people see how bad they were and repent? Right? And he held everybody just spellbound, and everybody could feel the dualistic place. All of us were there together. We were all right here. And then out of the audience started this Om, until 2,000 people are Om, and it's like a Greek chorus behind his sermon. Right? And then it becomes like waves of the ocean, and it's riding up over the sermon, and then the sermon's coming forward, and then the Om comes, and it's dualism and non-dualism and dualism and non-dualism. And, none of us can believe what's happening. It's so beautiful. Because everything he's saying is true. You dig that? It's all true. And you can take whatever take you want. You can make whatever figure you want. What's figure and what's ground? Okay? I mean, if you dig an ocean, and the ocean, I don't know whether I mentioned this before, makes mist, and the mist makes clouds, and the clouds make raindrops, and the raindrops go into the ocean. And you don't sit around yelling at the mist to become a raindrop, or ha ha ha, I'm a raindrop and you're only mist. Or, hey man, the place is down. No man, the place is up. Because nivritti and prakriti are both existent all the time. The force that goes into the many and the many that goes into the one. These are all simultaneously existing, always in perfect harmony. In the Hindu system, there are 4 kalpas, 4 yugas that make up a kalpa. And a yuga is a huge length of time. And at the end of 4 kalpas, there's this yuga, and there's the completion of the yuga. I'm sorry, at the end of the 4 yugas, there's the end of the kalpa. And at that point, Shiva, right? Shiva's been sitting on Mount Kailash or whichever mountain he happens to be sitting on. He's sitting in meditation, creating the whole thing out of his mind, okay? And at that point, he's been meditating for the whole kalpa. And at that point, he gets up and he dances. And when he dances, it's called the pralaya. It's when the whole thing ends. So he stops thinking it. And without his thought, like without the thought, where's the church? My teacher signs his letters to me by my own desire, Haridas Baba. Got that? Yeah. He's like creating himself. Right? By my own desire, Haridas Baba. Then Shiva sits down, gets himself comfortable, okay? And he starts to think it all again. Okay? And you can buy different models. One model is, the first thing he thinks is the Satyuga. See, he thinks how it all is when man is really almost all one, just very pure, very here and very now. It's where truth is, purity is, straightness is. Everybody is just the way they seem. Everybody says how it is. We're all right here. But we just barely come into separateness, but we're not into separateness, We're not into paranoid separateness. We're just into, like the fingers of your hand. Your index finger doesn't have to hate your pinky to make them stay separate. Okay? It's all the body of Christ, the many parts of the body. And that's the Satyuga, and that's when Ram is the avatar. See, he's the avatar in the very pure age. There's not much for an avatar to do in those days. Because even the guy who is his adversary, Ravana, is really a good guy taking a bad incarnation to finish off some karma. Okay? And his hope, Ravana's hope, is he'll be killed by Ram, which is a groovy kind of enemy to have, Because if you get killed by God, you're done, because he does it without attachment. He'll free you. It's like I was at Benares. It's the holy city where people go to die in India. Right? And that city is full of people who they're scrawny, they're dragging themselves across the street. Some of them have only one leg, and they're blinding, and they look like almost dead. They're waiting to die. They've come to the holy city of Kashi to die. Because if they die and they're burned on the burning ghat, then they are liberated. They're finished in this lifetime. Okay? And each of them has on his pouch, on his loincloth, a little pouch which has in it the $2.80 necessary to buy the firewood to be burned. Got it? Now, the first time I went to Benares, I walked through the streets and I freaked completely. Because I saw this poverty and this apparent suffering, and I projected into this something, And I thought, how can I even keep one traveler's check in my bag, as my mad money, when there is this cat in this condition? And I felt waves of pity, and I felt so much pity that I really couldn't take it. I went and stood at the burning ghat, and I watched the whole thing happen, stood right in the middle of it all night long, and it was just ripping me apart. It really blew my mind later on to realize where their heads were at, that all the time I was there, they were pitying me. Because they were looking and saying, this poor cat, he's not going to make it in this life. He's probably not going to die here in Kashi. And he's a Westerner, and they'll bury him. And he'll be attached to living, and as he dies, he'll try to hold on to life. He just won't, say, wow, here we go. I mean, Mahatma Gandhi, when he's shot, they drill full holes in him, and he doesn't say anything but rah. Okay? Now, we've been through enough violence in this country recently to know there are very few beings who are shot, and in the moment of, can say, I'm coming, or wow, it's over, or God, or I love you, or they usually say, what happened, or ooh, or ouch, or something like that. Those subtle attachments. But Gandhi understood at that point how it all is. He was living out his karma. He was doing his thing until it was done. He was doing it with honor, with total involvement, but with no attachment. He was so unattached that he didn't try to hold on to it when it was time for it to be over. He was living life consciously. Living life consciously. And each chapter that ends, instead of holding on, like being a prepubescent, and having an older brother who sits in the living room all day making out, and you are busy with baseball cards. See, and it's really bugging you that he's no longer interested in baseball cards, because he's got one of the largest collections. See? I mean, why, man? Why isn't he interested in baseball cards? I'm interested in baseball cards. Because it hasn't yet happened to you. That whole endocrine flash, the rush. The rush hasn't happened. Before I went to India, it used to blow my mind. Now and then I'd be in some situation where I'd see, it's like kids going to a dancing school, and they're about 7 or 8 years old. And they're all wearing bow ties, and they were wearing jackets and long pants, and the girls wearing these dresses, very seductive dresses, and they were all doing this thing. They were coming on to each other. And I could see this exquisite form, but what made it happen wasn't there. It was just pure mimicry. He used to run a nursery school. And they used to play house, and the girls would now and then corral a guy into playing house with them, one of the boys, who was about 3. And he'd say, all right, you be the daddy. So they'd sit him down at the table, and they'd say, here's dinner, it's buttered beets. And he'd say, that's great, honey. And whatever was said, he'd always say the right answer and then add honey, see, which obviously was the thing you're supposed to do to be playing daddy. And the tricky problem is to learn about being holy before you're holy. See? To go on a mind trip about holiness. We all get to see how it is to be in the Spirit. We read about it, and then we all start to come on holy. And it's really horrible. Because you always sneak out for whatever it is you sneak out for. It's a huge, huge, big game. And the thing is, it gets you so far from being holy. You know, you're so busy, I'm holy. You know? And then it gets deception and, I'm holy all except for. I've been doing sadhana, sadhana means spiritual work. It means work on the path. It means finishing with it all, dualism till it's over. Yeah? And a couple of years ago, when I'd come back from India and I was in New Hampshire, I had been in the temple and and then I came back to this cabin and I was being very careful about my sadhana, and I thought, well, I'll take a night off. I've been working very hard on this sadhana. I've been a full-time sadhak, see, a seeker of enlightenment, and I can have a night off, can't I? I look at the picture, Maharaj, you don't mind, do you, if I take one night off? My father, who was always standing in the wings buying me root beer and stuff, said, "Here, take my Cadillac." So I got into his Cadillac, and I drove with 9 speakers inside, and the seat goes in all directions electrically, and you're driving, floating through the air, the seat lying back and coming up, and music, Vivaldi guitar concerto pouring through the car. And I think, wow, man, they should see me in India now. And I went up to the Weirs. It's on Lake Winnipesaukee, figuring that's a good place to take a night off. There's bowling, and there's sugar candy, and there's a rock and roll band, and there's speedboat rides, and there's, fun and games. The stuff that's fun, and there's chicks to meet and people to, who knows? It's a night off. I got up there, and I was standing in the middle of the boardwalk, and everybody was like walking around, and all of it was just so here and now. It was just all so, we were all just part of each other. And I was the sugar candy, and the bowling balls were in my head, and I could feel the speedboats thing in my spine, and the rock and roll band was pulsing in my first chakra, and, I was just standing there like stoned out of my head, just on all the energy. And some hippies came along. As distinguished from others. The funny thing is the hip bone has in it the joint is the pyxis, and the pyxis is actually a vessel for carrying the Eucharist. So that's what hippies are. So at any rate, these hippies stopped me, and they said, "Well, what do you think of the Weirs, man?" And I looked, and I saw the mouth open and words come out. "What do you think of the Weirs, man?" It's like you've been, in the evening, see, I just get so turned on here, you know, all of our energy just feeds through each of us, you know, we're all just getting, you know, at the end I'm just like, there's nobody home, you know. And I sort of sit here sort of zonked, and very often somebody whose mind game is still whirring away, after a while they come up and they tap me and they say, "Excuse me, Dr. Alpert, may I ask you a question?" And I look, and it's like a man from outer space, you know. "Excuse me." Once I was doing it sounds like a nightclub routine, but it's, after all, those are churches too, and I think it is a nightclub routine. It's night, and it's a club, it's a routine. I was doing 3 evenings at the committee in San Francisco. Now, this was before I went to India. I play churches now. And my problem in those days was how to keep my consciousness at the right level. See? And because I had all these bottles and things to smoke and eat and chew and do everything with, but it was very delicate to control it just so that at 8:15 you'd be in the right place in your head, you know. And the first week I hadn't yet arranged it right because everybody took me out to the ocean for an LSD session. And so then they, you know, when you've been with the ocean and the sand and, you know, in that state, and then you're sort of carried in and put on the stage. And the thing we do, wave of the sea, dissolve in the sea, had all happened, you see. And I looked out and it was just ocean. I mean, I didn't see anybody at all. And this was programmed as a night of questions and answers. And a man raised his hand, he stood up and he had on a tie and a vest and a jacket. And he said, "Dr. Alpert, would you please talk about the psychodynamic implications of psychedelic ingestion in view of the research on the synaptic thresholds?" And I looked at him, and what I saw, see, was like I was trying to find the plane we were to play at, see. I mean, I was really desperately looking for the playing field, but it was eluding me. What I saw, I tuned in on just one plane too far out, see. And what I saw was this man saying, "Do you love me?" See? So I looked at him, I said, "Yes, I love you." And he said, "That doesn't satisfy me at all."